The first thing I heard was the soft, steady beep. Slow, gentle, like a heartbeat whispering in the dark. I opened my eyes, but everything felt too bright. The light above me flickered, making the edges of the ceiling blur. My chest felt tight, like someone had placed a cold, heavy stone right over my ribs. The scent of antiseptics stung my nose, sharp and clean, but in a way that made everything feel distant, like I wasn't fully in my own skin. I tried to move my fingers. They shook against the sheets, crisp, starchy, cold. I wanted to pull them up to my chest, but my arms felt too weak, like they didn't belong to me. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rolled past, wheels squeaking against the linoleum. I closed my eyes again, but the monitor kept reminding me I was still here, still breathing, still waiting. She was standing in the hallway when I turned my head. I don't know how long she'd been there. Just there. Her coat hung loose around her, and the harsh glow above her made the shadows under her eyes deeper than I remembered. She looked tired. Not from the hour, from something else, from everything. Her eyes met mine for a second. Then they dropped. I swallowed the tight knot in my throat. "You didn't have to come." She didn't answer. There was lavender in the air, her lotion. I'd always loved it, but tonight, even that felt muted, like everything else between us. She clutched the envelope like it held something more than paper. Her fingers trembled, though she tried to hide it. I stared at it, and something in my chest pulled tight. That envelope didn't belong here. Not in a place like this. I looked at her face, waiting, hoping. "I found this," she said quietly. I nodded, but didn't reach for it. I remembered the last thing I wrote her, handwritten on lined paper, folded twice. I had written it with hope, but now all I could hear was the crinkle of paper and the silence that followed. I watched her mouth close again. No words came out. Something in me broke a little, not loud, not suddenly, just quietly gave way. The silence between us was colder than the air around us. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to fill that emptiness. I thought of her as a little girl, curled beside me, laughing at bedtime stories. That felt like another lifetime. Now she looked right past me, not through me, past me and all I could taste was fear, sharp and bitter. I didn't want to say it, but I knew. She had already left long before tonight. I lowered my feet to the ground. The floor was cold, sharp enough to wake me from the fog. My fingers curled around the edge of the bed as I pulled myself upright. The hallway stretched out before me, long and dim under buzzing lights. I closed my eyes and let out a breath, slow and steady. It was the first time I'd felt my heartbeat match the monitors. For a moment, they were in rhythm. I remembered storms I had survived, not weather, but people, pain, loss. And I reminded myself I was still here, still standing, and that meant something. I stopped under the buzzing fixture, light flickering like it wasn't sure whether to stay on or give up. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't spoken the truth yet. Not really. Not to her. But I had. Promised myself long ago. Never again would I let fear speak louder than my voice. My heart pounded against my ribs, steady and sharp. I felt it echo in my hands, my ears, my throat. Then I took one breath. One long, steady breath, and with that, I opened my eyes and started walking toward the truth. The pen felt heavier than it should have. My fingers wrapped around it, but they didn't feel steady. I could hear the wall clock ticking behind me, soft and slow, like it was counting my doubts. She stood across the room, near the bookshelf, not saying anything, just waiting. Her perfume, light and floral, drifted past me as I looked down at the page. I stared at the blank line where my name was meant to go. "It's just a formality, Mom," she said gently. "I'll only use it if there's ever an emergency." I nodded. "I know." But still, my hand hesitated. The afternoon light danced on the paper, catching in the curve of each letter already printed. My name was the last piece. I drew in a breath, slow and thin. Then I signed. The moment the ink dried, something in my chest loosened. But something else coiled tighter. I crouched down by the side table and tugged at the drawer. It groaned against years of dust and quiet. The wood resisted me, like it knew I wasn't ready. And then it slid open. I reached inside, pushing past some faded envelopes and a broken pen. And there it was, a folded sheet tucked deep against the back panel. My fingers brushed its edge, and a strange chill slipped through me. Not cold, more like memory. I pulled it out carefully. "I almost forgot about you," I whispered. The room stayed still, just the soft creak of a floorboard under my knee and the hum of the fan above. Remembered my boys, young and laughing, sliding on these floorboards in socks. I could almost hear them. But now it was just me, and the quiet weight of what I'd just found. I sat on the edge of the couch, pressing the paper gently to my chest. My fingers curled around it like it was something sacred. I could still hear his voice, low and kind. "This home isn't just wood and windows, sweetheart. It's us." The corner of the page was rough against my palm, not sharp, but firm. Just enough to remind me it was real. I exhaled slowly, the way I used to when I'd finally rock a baby to sleep. This deed wasn't just ink. It was a lifeline, quietly waiting, patiently surviving time and silence. And suddenly, I knew. It had waited for me to be ready. The sunlight had started to shift across the rug when the weight crept in. It wasn't sudden. It just settled, slow and familiar. I sat in my rocking chair and let it hold me. The cushions were a little flattened, the way things get when you've used them for years. I looked at the papers again, now stacked neatly on the table. There were nights I walked this house whispering truths into empty rooms, words I couldn't say out loud, especially not to her. And now they pressed in on me. The unsaid things, the protection that became silence, the dust in. The room wasn't just from age. It felt like regret, and I sat with it, because maybe that's what I owed. The curtains shifted with the breeze, brushing against the windowsill like a gentle nudge. I felt the warmth of the sun stretch across my shoulder as I stood by the table. Looked down at the deed again, not with fear this time, but with a strange kind of calm. I wasn't just her mother. I was her history, her roots. I was someone who carried stories too long in silence. I traced the edges of the paper, letting my fingertips feel the shape of it, the promise tucked inside. The light glinted through the lace, dotting the floor with shifting shapes. It was time. The light had softened by now, no longer gold, but something between gold and gray. I sat in the armchair with the deed resting on my lap. I didn't hold it tightly, just gently. The crickets had started. One by one, their soft chirps filled the space that used to feel too quiet. I let my eyes drift toward the window, where the sky was slowly turning into velvet. "I'll tell her," I whispered. The air stirred through the open pane, carrying a hint of jasmine and something older, maybe memory. I pressed the paper once more to my chest, not in fear this time, but in peace. The beep of the monitor was soft, steady, and strangely soothing. I blinked against the pale ceiling and turned toward the low hum near my side. My phone sat there, screen lit up in an eerie glow. The minute I touched it, it vibrated, once, twice, and then everything came all at once. Notifications tumbled. down like a waterfall, missed calls, unread messages, alerts from the bank, and then one from the realtor's app I didn't remember installing. My chest tightened. The room smelled like bleach and plastic, but beneath it was something colder. Reality. The blankets didn't feel like warmth. They felt like a boundary I hadn't agreed to. I tapped the screen. Everything around me stayed quiet. Still, except for that little screen blinking back. In that one breath, my peace cracked. I didn't mean to open the message. My thumb brushed the alert on accident. Or maybe it was muscle memory. Either way, the words burned. Sold at $350,000, I froze. Not pending, not listed, sold. The air shifted. Same room, same beeps. But it all felt different. The cleaner's smell turned sharp, like lemon rind scraped raw. I read it again, then again. The number stayed the same. My home, gone. And no one had told me. I blinked up at the ceiling and whispered to no one. She didn't even ask. The pain in my side from the surgery was dull compared to the sharpness blooming in my chest. She had my signature. She had my trust. And now she has my house. My throat felt tight, dry. Not from medication, but from the sting of betrayal. I wanted to scream, but the air around me felt too thick to cut through. She knew, I said, more to the wall than to anyone. She knew what that house meant. No one answered. Just the machines clicking, tapping, beeping their same indifference. And suddenly I realized, even recovery rooms carry wounds they can't stitch. I sat up a little, but not because I felt stronger. I just needed to feel like I still existed. The light through the blinds cast stripes across my blanket, soft and pale. It should have felt comforting, but all I felt was alone. No voices, no footsteps, no warmth. Just the monitor echoing like a lullaby too late. The air wasn't cold, but the silence was, and it crept into the corners of my body, in my fingers, behind my knees, under my ribs. I whispered, "What now?" But the room gave no reply. Everything. Inside me felt flat. Not broken, just dulled, like someone had turned the volume down on my life. I looked around, but nothing moved. Not the curtain, not the air, not even my emotions. This used to be where I'd find comfort. These halls, this care, even laughter. Now it was just walls, cold and white and wide. I pressed my lips together and swallowed down something that wasn't quite a sob. Just wait. A nurse passed outside. I didn't look up. I wasn't ready to be seen in this kind of pain. I wrapped my hands around the cool bed rail, pressing my palms until they tingled. I closed my eyes, breathed in deep, and let it all rise, the confusion, the anger, the sadness. But underneath it, something else stirred, something quieter. Not rage, not despair, resolve. I opened my eyes again and turned toward the sunlight gathering by the window. It painted my blanket gold. "You're not done," I whispered to myself. Shifted, stiff but steady, and sat all the way up. Healing, I realized, doesn't wait for apologies. It begins the moment you decide you're worth standing back up. Her name came out of my mouth like a breath I'd been holding too long. "Emily!" My voice shook. Not loud, but enough to rattle the silence we'd been sitting in. She looked. Up from her phone, barely. The kettle let out a soft whistle behind us, then fell quiet, like it too had run out of steam. "I needed to know before," I said. "Not after." The chipped teacup in my hand trembled. I could feel its edge press into the crease of my finger, porcelain cold against skin. "You said you trusted me," she muttered. "I did," I replied. "Until you gave me reason not to." The room was thick with something unsaid. Hurt, history, maybe both. The faucet dripped, steady and slow. The light from the window dimmed behind rain-speckled glass. And still we sat, the storm not in the sky, but between us. My hands wouldn't stop sweating. I wiped them once on my skirt, but it didn't help. I reached for the teacup, its handle, smooth from years of use. It fit my fingers like it always had, familiar, fragile. The warmth was gone. Only the porcelain remained. I held it close, like it could ground me. She was staring at the table, not saying a word. "Emily," I said again, but my throat was tight. She didn't look up. I set the cup down, maybe too hard. It made a hollow thud against the oak. I flinched. The sound echoed through the stillness, louder than I expected. It felt like something inside me had dropped with it. That old teacup had been through every holiday, every long night. Now it sat between us like a witness, chipped and silent. The quiet that followed was heavier than the words we'd just exchanged. No yelling, no apology, just a pause that wrapped around the whole room. The refrigerator hummed softly in the background. I could hear my own breath. Emily pushed her chair back, slowly. The legs scraped across the tile in a way that made my teeth clench. She didn't stand, not yet, but the motion was enough. A threat, a retreat. I looked at her, hoping she'd meet my eyes. She didn't. The thunder rumbled low, somewhere outside. The house didn't shake, but my resolve did. And the silence? It was louder than anything she could have said. She looked away first. That's when I felt it. Something inside me unraveled, a thread pulled loose, and with it, 100 moments followed. Her hand in mine on her first day of school. Her voice called me Mama through the bathroom door. All of it felt distant now. The tea had gone cold. Its scent still lingered, jasmine and something I couldn't name. But it mixed now with something sour, something broken. I didn't mean to, she whispered. I barely heard her. My heartbeat felt loud in my ears, too loud to focus. I just thought it was best. Best for who, I wanted to ask. But I didn't. The floor creaked beneath my foot. Even the room seemed to tense with me. My fist came down before I thought. It wasn't anger, not the wild kind anyway. It was grief. It needed to land somewhere. The counter groaned under the blow, and the sound echoed through the kitchen, then fell into a hush. Tears welled up, stinging my eyes. I blinked hard, but one slipped free anyway. Outside the window, the rain had started. Slow, gentle. It rolled down the glass like tears I couldn't hold back. The faucet dripped behind me, steady as ever. Tick, tick, tick. Emily didn't speak. She didn't need to. That silence between us was now filled with something that couldn't be swept away easily. The sky outside had turned almost blue-gray, the kind of color that settles in just before the rain starts falling harder. I stood, there, at the head of the table, feeling it. Not anger, not quite sadness, but something deeper. Resolve. I took a breath, cool and full. The kind of breath that says, I'm still here. The kettle let out one final puff of steam, like it had done its part and was ready to rest. I looked at her, still seated, still silent. I don't know how we come back from this, I said softly. But I'm still your mother. And that, somehow, gave me the strength to stay standing. There was a soft knock at the door, not urgent, just familiar. I knew that rhythm. Mrs. Alvarez. My pulse fluttered as I crossed the room, the floor creaking under each step. The mantel clock ticked gently in the background, marking the quiet midday hush. When I opened the door, there she was, wrapped in her lavender cardigan, just like always. The scent of it mixed with the warm sun that filled the hallway, making everything feel softer somehow. Hope I'm not intruding, she said with a small smile. I stepped aside. Never. We'd shared years across this hallway. Coffee, holidays, whispered worries over garden fences. But today, something in her eyes said this visit held more. Sometimes the gentlest knocks open the biggest doors. She sat down slowly, placing the small oak box on the table between us. Her fingers moved over it with care, tracing grooves worn smooth by time. "This has been with me a long time," she said. "Your husband gave it to me to hold, just in case." I didn't speak, just watched. My hands trembled slightly as I reached out. The box was warm, heavier than it looked. The sunlight caught the grain of the wood, and I saw dust float up like it had been waiting too. The hum of the old radio played faintly in the background. A love song, I think. And in that silence, I felt something shift. Some objects don't just carry keepsakes, they carry meaning. Her hands moved slowly, unfolding the aged paper like it was a secret she'd promised to keep. I leaned in, breath catching. The edges were yellowed, but the ink, his handwriting, was still clear. I remembered his voice in the dark one night, years ago. "You'll have something to stand on, even if I'm not there." He hadn't just meant comfort. He meant something real. Something lasting. The scent of the paper mixed with the warm spring air drifting through the curtains. Mrs. Alvarez didn't say much. She didn't need to. Some truths unfold themselves when the heart is finally ready. Tears came quietly. No sobbing. No sound. Just warmth spilling down my cheeks, soaking the edges of the lace cloth beneath my hand. I reached for my teacup. The steam had faded, but the weight of it grounded me. All those nights pacing the floor, wondering if I'd made the right choices. All those silent prayers I whispered while the world slept. They led here, to this table, to this kind woman, to a piece of paper that felt like forgiveness, and I let myself cry. Not from pain, but from release. Some tears carry sorrow. These carried grace. The codicil glowed as sunlight touched the page, making the words shimmer like they were brand new. I held it close, tracing the lines with my eyes, then with my fingertips. "You always had a way of preparing me," I whispered, aloud, to the room, to him. Dust motes danced above the paper, soft and slow, like blessings. The ache in my chest didn't vanish, but it shifted. It softened. I could feel something deeper than closure. It was understanding. Some truths, when they finally find the light, become the stitching that holds us together again. I clutched the paper gently, my thumb brushing over the name of the cottage. I could already hear the waves. Not in memory, in future. I closed my eyes, let the sunlight wrap around me, and imagined walking barefoot across a porch that smelled like salt and pine. For the first time in a long while, my chest felt open, as if every worry had floated. Off with the tide. Mrs. Alvarez sat beside me, quiet, steady. "I think you'll like it there," she said. I nodded, smiling through tears. Sometimes the road to peace is paved by the kindest hands. The first light of dawn slid across the walls, soft as a sigh. I dipped my brush into the paint and touched it to the worn frame, letting the bristles glide. The wood drank it in slowly, like it had waited for this for a long time. Each stroke peeled something old away, grief, maybe, and left behind something quiet and new. The salty breeze drifted in through the open window and teased my hair. It felt like an old friend whispering, "Keep going." I paused only once to breathe it in, the scent of sea air mixed with fresh paint. There was no rush, just me, the light, and the wood beneath my hand. Sometimes healing isn't loud or fast. Sometimes it's just one careful movement at a time, done before the world even wakes. The floor creaked under my steps, but not in protest, more like recognition. I'd walked this workshop before, but today each sound felt like a welcome. Like the cottage knew I was different now. The timber beneath my feet was old, worn, full of stories. I could almost hear them, soft echoes of heartbreak, laughter, long silences, second chances. A misty breeze slipped through the window, bringing with it the scent of salt and thyme. I knelt to pick up a rag and heard another groan from the boards. "Hear you," I whispered, because I did. Every mark in this room had something to teach me, and I was finally ready to learn. I swirled my brush gently in the little porcelain palette, watching color come to life. Soft sky blue, pale sand, the kind of warm white that reminded me of early mornings on the porch. Each shade held something, a memory, a moment. I smiled as I mixed them. Outside, the waves rolled steady below, their crash far enough to be calming, but close enough to feel. My hands worked without thinking, but my heart was fully awake. In every blend, I found pieces of both what was and what could be. Turns out, you don't have to erase the past to paint something new. You just have to be willing to hold both in the same hand. The brush felt solid. In my grip, steady. My fingers didn't shake like they used to. I dipped into the paint again and let it spread across the frame in long, slow strokes. There was something almost holy in the sound, the soft hiss of brush meeting wood. It calmed me. I'd spent nights in this space questioning everything. Now, all I could feel was quiet determination. No grand epiphany, no fireworks, just strength, the kind that doesn't announce itself, but keeps showing up morning after morning. The seagulls cried out beyond the wall, somewhere in the sky, and I smiled. Somewhere along the way, I had woven strength into every corner of this room, and it held me now, like my own hands did. The wind rolled in again, salty and cool, curling through the window panes and brushing my skin. It caught the ends of my sleeves and danced across the eye. Wet paint, not disturbing it, just reminding me it was alive. I stood still for a moment, eyes closed, letting it pass through me. This room had held my tears. It echoed my fears. Now it carried only a gentle hush, like the ocean was breathing for me. Brine and paint. What an odd, beautiful pairing. One, a reminder of where I'd been. The other, of where I was going. The breeze wrapped around my shoulders, like a shawl, and whispered, "Let go." So I did. I stood back, letting the morning light wash over the fresh coat. The window frames, once dull and cracked, now gleamed under the sun's touch. They weren't perfect. A few brush strokes uneven, a line just slightly off, but they were mine, and in them, I saw myself. The woman who had walked into this room years ago wouldn't recognize the one standing here now. The waves outside kept time with my breathing, slow, steady. "Look at you," I whispered, not to the frames, but to myself. Sometimes, the proof of healing isn't in a changed heart, but in the hands that keep trying, that keep painting, that keep choosing to begin again. The greenhouse welcomed me like a breath held too long. Warm air hugged my face, thick with the smell of soil and life. Outside, frost clung to the glass, but inside, the mist shimmered. My breath joined it, a soft cloud in the glow. Thomas stood near the far table, sleeves rolled, soil on his palms. He looked up and smiled, that quiet, easy kind. "Want to help?" he asked, offering a bulb. I hesitated, then nodded. "When?" I reached for it, his hand brushed mine, rough, steady. The touch made something flutter in my chest, not nerves, something gentler. Hope. The daffodil bulb sat in my palm like a secret waiting to be planted. As I knelt beside him, the scent of earth wrapped around me like a warm shawl. Sometimes, healing doesn't begin with answers. Sometimes it begins with dirt under your nails and someone handing you a reason to stay. His hands were strong, knotted with time and work, but they moved with such care. He guided my fingers into the soil beside his, pressing the bulb down gently. "Just like that," he said, voice low. Not too deep, not too shallow. I glanced at him, smiled. I've never done this before. He chuckled. Doesn't matter. You're doing it now. The dirt was cool and crumbly, sticking to my skin. My hands, which had once trembled with loneliness, now moved steadily alongside his. There wasn't much talking, but we didn't need it. Our laughter echoed softly off the glass walls, little bursts of light in the quiet. As we worked side by side, I realized trust doesn't always grow in grand moments. Sometimes it's down quietly, with soil under your nails, and someone choosing to stay close. We had just finished the second row when something funny slipped out. I can't even remember what now. And we both laughed. Really laughed. It rang out, clear and full, bouncing off the frosted windows. It felt like music, the kind that doesn't come from speakers, but from somewhere buried deep inside. My chest swelled with something I hadn't felt in so long. Not just joy, freedom. Even the leaves seemed to shimmer, trembling with dew, catching our laughter in their curves. I caught my breath and looked at him. I forgot I could still laugh like that, I said. Thomas just grinned. You never stopped. You just needed the right place. Sometimes the frost doesn't melt from the sun alone. Sometimes it takes laughter shared between two people brave enough to bloom. The scent of earth filled my lungs, damp, sweet, alive. It settled me in a way I couldn't explain, like everything noisy in my head suddenly stepped aside. We worked in rhythm now. No rush, just gentle focus. My fingers were dark with soil, the smudges sinking into every crease. I didn't wipe them. Clean. They felt earned. Thomas reached over to pass another bulb. I nodded, grateful. This was no grand adventure. Just two people, side by side, mending something invisible. I thought of all the nights I'd curled into silence, aching for something solid to hold on to. Now, my hands were in the dirt, planting small pieces of future. And in that moment, I understood. Some healing doesn't need words. Just earth, breath, and presence. I pressed the final daffodil bulb into the soil, smoothing the earth over it with care. Each bulb I'd planted felt like a prayer whispered into the roots. I looked down the row, neat, hopeful. They'd bloom. In time, I knew. But today, even before the petals arrived, something inside me had already bloomed. Thomas wiped his brow, glanced over, and nodded in approval. You've got the touch, he said. I smiled. I think they're teaching me. The light filtered through the frosted glass, casting golden streaks across the leaves. I noticed a single drop of dew shimmer at the tip of a sprout, delicate as a tear. Even after the longest winters, something always pushes through. That's what daffodils know. And maybe now I do too. Thomas leaned over one of the trays, brushing soil from his hands. A crooked grin stretched across his face as he looked at the young sprouts. Not bad, huh? He said. I stood beside him, watching the pale green tips sway gently in the soft breeze from the vents. I still can't believe they're growing, I whispered. You helped, he said. That matters. Warmth spread through my chest, not from the room, but from his words. These hands, which once knew only empty spaces and quiet goodbyes, now knew what it felt like to build again. We didn't need to hold hands. The work we shared had already done that. As I looked at the trays before us, rows of silent, reaching life, I realized something simple, something strong. The roots of friendship don't begin in conversation. They begin in shared soil and the choice to plant side by side. The grass was cool beneath my feet, the blades bending with dew as I stepped forward and paused. Each droplet clung to my heel like a question I hadn't yet answered. I stood still, heart fluttering inside my chest, not fear, not peace. Something in between. The wind carried the scent of sea salt and blooming daffodils. In the distance, a gull cried out, then another. They sounded like memories, old ones, the kind that echo in places you forgot still held weight. I glanced up at the cottage. The curtains didn't move, the porch didn't creak, but I knew she was there. She always had a way of standing just beyond the frame. I could have turned back, but I didn't. I pressed my toes into the grass, grounding myself, and took one step closer, then another, because sometimes the smallest steps, made on soft, trembling earth, lead to something worth reaching for. My hand hovered above the doorframe, hesitant, then rested against the weathered wood. It was warm from the sun, familiar despite the time that had passed. Then her voice broke the silence. I didn't know where else to go. Her tone cracked, fragile and exposed, like something that had been tucked away too long. I opened the door. She stood there, not polished, not proud, just human. Her hair was windblown, her eyes rimmed in something older than tears. And behind her, the garden stirred. Blossoms drifted on a breeze that smelled like rain hadn't yet come. I was lost, she said, voice thinner now. Without home, without you. My hand trembled where it rested on the frame. I know, I whispered. Truth doesn't always come in perfect sentences. Sometimes it arrives like that, trembling but sincere. And when it does, you listen. She reached into her coat pocket, with fingers that fumbled slightly, then pulled out a folded photograph. It was worn at the edges, the paper soft with time. I kept it, she said. She opened it carefully and held it between us. There we were, the two of us and him. Smiles, frozen in soft sepia. The sunlight in the picture looked warmer than I remembered. I leaned closer, eyes tracing the lines of our younger faces. So much hope in those expressions, so much we didn't yet know. The wind curled around us, lifting the faint scent of old paper and the sea. I look like him now, she murmured. You always did, I said, trying to steady my voice. The photograph trembled in her grip, and I reached out to hold one corner, steadying it, and maybe both of us. Sometimes memory can hurt, but sometimes it holds just enough light to guide you home again. There was something in her eyes I hadn't seen. In years, not just regret, but recognition, like she saw me again. Not just as history, but as mother. I thought, you wouldn't want to see me, she said softly. I've thought a lot of things, I replied, my voice uneven. The ache in my ribs bloomed, not from anger, but from the weight of everything we never said. Her hand brushed against mine, light as a feather, hesitant. I didn't pull away. We just stood like that, side by side, fingers barely touching, both of us trying to speak through the silence. The breeze tugged at her sleeves, and birdsong rose somewhere beyond the garden. The air smelled like green things and salt. We weren't healed, not yet, but something was beginning. Maybe regret, when shared, doesn't have to stay as sorrow. Maybe it can be a bridge. Pink petals spun gently through the air, caught in the slow dance of the wind. They landed on her shoulder, her hair, the porch step between us. She didn't brush them away. She just looked up at me, eyes glassy. I never stopped missing you, she said. Her voice was barely louder than the breeze. One tear slipped from her cheek, catching a drifting blossom on its way down. It clung there for a heartbeat before falling to the grass. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I stepped forward. The grass gave a soft crunch beneath my shoes. She stepped closer too, but no words passed between us. Just the petals, just the wind, just the hush of everything we'd ever been to each other, returning. Some reunions are made of apologies. Ours began in silence, quiet, sacred, and wrapped in spring. The clouds above us slowly parted. letting sunlight stream down in soft gold beams that warmed my shoulders. She stood before me, eyes wide and wet, reaching, not desperately, not with force, just open. Her fingers brushed mine, and I let them. The breeze lifted the ends of her coat and carried a fresh gust of sea air across the porch. I breathed it in, letting forgiveness and something like peace settle deep in my lungs. "You're here," I said, as if confirming it for both of us. "I'm here," she replied. We didn't smile fully, not yet, but there was a flicker, something between hope and relief, rising at the corners of our mouths. The gulls called from above, and the trees swayed gently behind the cottage. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive all at once. Sometimes it begins, with one hand held under an open sky, and the choice to stay. We walked in silence at first, our steps slow along the winding stone path. The earth was still damp from last night's rain, and each footstep stirred up the scent of turned soil. Daffodil stems brushed softly against my skirt, but I barely noticed. The words were already pressing against my chest. "I need to say it," I began, voice thick. "I need you to hear it." She said nothing, just kept walking beside me, her eyes ahead, her breath shallow. "I was hurt," I said, "not just by what you did, but by what you didn't say, what you left me to carry alone." She turned slightly, the sun catching in her eyes, but she didn't speak. I pressed on. "I waited for you to ask how I was. I waited for you to care." I stopped walking. She did too. The path curved ahead of us, quiet and warm in the golden light. "You didn't come," I said, voice breaking. "When I needed you the most, you didn't come." Her lips parted, then closed again. Her shoulders sagged. I felt every word land like an ember on dry ground. But sometimes, pain needs air to breathe before it can begin to heal. The daffodils along the path swayed gently, yellow faces turned toward the sun. I found myself staring at them as I spoke, needing something still to focus on while everything inside me moved. They didn't judge. They just stood tall, petals, trembling in the breeze like they were listening. "I didn't want to make you the villain," I said quietly, "but I didn't know how to name my grief without blaming you." I could feel her watching me now, but I didn't turn. The flowers were enough. "I wasn't angry at first," I went on, "just confused, then alone. And that turned into something harder." I finally turned to her. Her hands were clasped, tightly in front of her, knuckles pale. "I didn't know you were hurting too," I added. The daffodils leaned as the breeze picked up, like they were nodding. In that moment, I realized we weren't alone in our pain. Not really. Beauty had stood beside us all along, quiet, steady, ready to hold space for the truth. The words came faster now, no longer trembling. They cracked and sparked as they left my mouth. "I felt like I didn't matter to you," I said, stepping back as if I needed space to breathe. "Like everything we'd built together meant less to you than your pride." She opened her mouth, but I shook my head. "Let me finish." The sun pushed through the trees above us, landing bright and hot. On the stones at our feet, I could feel it on my skin, a sharp contrast to the cold in my voice. "You left me," I said, softer now. "You left me to wonder what I did wrong. And I carried that like a wound that wouldn't close." She swallowed hard. "I never stopped caring." "But you stopped showing it," I whispered. The bird calls overhead felt far away, like the rest of the world was watching from a distance. Some truths ignite like fire, painful, purifying, and in their light we can finally see. Her fingers trembled as she reached for my arm, and I didn't flinch. Not this time. She barely touched me, just enough to bridge the space between us. "I didn't know how to come back," she said. I looked down at her hand, cool against the warmth of my skin. My breath caught. I was scared, she added, voice cracking, that if I said it out loud, it would mean I really failed you. I nodded, steadying myself. You didn't fail. You just stepped away when I needed you to stay. I remembered the strength it had taken to tell her, all of it, the nights spent rehearsing, the fear of what her silence would mean. But here she was, vulnerable, eyes glassy, mouth open like she wanted to say more but didn't know how. And I saw her then, not as the one who hurt me, but as someone hurting too. Truth doesn't always heal, but sometimes it makes space for grace. The sun had lowered behind the trees, stretching our shadows across the stone path. Hers touched mine, long and unsteady, like we were reaching for one another without trying. I didn't mean to. Disappear from your life, she said. I didn't answer at first. I just watched the sunlight ripple across the leaves overhead, light and shadow trading places on the ground. I know, I finally said, but it still hurts. She stepped closer. I wanted to call. I glanced down at our shadows, weaving, in and out of the dappled gold. You still can. The wind carried the scent of daffodils and distant sea salt. A petal fluttered between us and landed on the stone, pale pink and soft. Healing, I thought, isn't one long stretch of light. It moves in rhythm, sometimes painful, sometimes gentle, a push and a pull. But here we were, still walking the same path, still trying. We stood for a long while without speaking. The breeze was softer now, brushing against my sleeves as if the garden itself had let out a long breath. She wiped her eyes. I don't know what comes next. Neither do I said. But I think this matters. She nodded. I'm sorry, she whispered. So am I. The petals on the path shifted in the wind. The sun was beginning to fade, but the light that remained felt warm, not harsh. I didn't expect to feel better, I admitted. But I do. The hush between us wasn't heavy anymore. It felt gentle, settled. Forgiveness had taken its time. It hadn't come easy. But now that it was here, it felt like rich soil after fire, ready to grow something new. Sometimes the moment you stop holding your pain like a shield is the moment it becomes something else entirely, something like peace. The sky melted above me in strokes of salmon and lavender, painting the porch in quiet grace. I sank onto the wooden step, my knees creaking softly as I let the day go. The sea breeze brushed my cheek, carrying hints of salt and jasmine. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting it settle into my skin. The cicadas were steady now, their hum weaving through the trees like a lullaby I hadn't known I needed. My shoulders, tense for days, finally dropped. Just a little. Just enough. No. One needed me right now. Nothing required fixing, and in that stillness, I didn't feel empty. I felt full. I watched the sky deepen, slow and unhurried. The kind of peace you don't chase, the kind you choose, even a heart that's been bruised can find quiet here. On a porch, under a painted sky, with nothing but breath and breeze between it and healing. I leaned back slowly, letting the worn boards of the porch catch me. The wood was cool and solid beneath me, not hard, but steady, familiar. It cradled me like it had before, like it always would. I drew in a deep breath, the air tinged with salt and sun that had just dipped past the trees. My bones sighed with it. Not out of pain, but out of permission, to rest, to pause. The sky darkened above me, but not in sadness, in softness, in promise. My pulse slowed to match the breeze, the hush, the rhythm of evening itself. I didn't need anything else just then. Sometimes it's not comfort that saves us. It's quiet, and a porch that remembers your weight. The air was heavier now, not with heat, but with memory, the kind that stirs gently instead of shouting. I sat upright, eyes on the horizon, and let the ache surface, the one that lives just under the skin, from all the times I'd bent too far to keep the peace. But tonight, something steadier rose with it. Not bitterness, not defiance. Calm. The breeze curled through the lace curtains behind me, carrying the scent of the sea and the sound of my own strength coming back to me. Not loud, not suddenly, but real. I wasn't hardening. I was choosing to draw lines in kindness, to love from a distance when needed. Some boundaries don't push others out. They simply let you stay, standing inside. Tears came again, not sharp, not panicked. Just warm, like they belonged there. I wiped one away with the back of my hand and smiled through the blur. I'd forgiven before, and I'd forgotten how good it felt. To unclench my chest, to taste the salt on my lips and know it wasn't sorrow, not entirely. Just release. The horizon flickered gold, like the last candle of the day offering a gentle farewell. I watched it until it dimmed, until the shadows softened around me. Forgiveness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it flickers. But oh, how it glows in the places we thought would always stay. Dark, the stars hadn't fully arrived yet, but the sky had turned that deep indigo I loved, the color of promises held in quiet hands. I sat tall now, spine against the railing, and let the last streaks of light dance across the porch rail. They sparkled on the salt left behind by sea wind, soft and fleeting, like blessings. I remembered what I told myself months ago. I will leave more than pain behind, and I meant it. Not through big acts, just steady ones, a kind word here, a patient pause there. My story didn't have to be grand. It just had to be good. Strength wrapped in gentleness, compassion that outlasts the noise. That's what I'd leave behind. That, and a porch that remembers the way I rested in peace, not just after storms, but because I had weathered them. Thank you for sitting with me through this quiet journey, from pain to porchlight peace. If any part of it reminded you of your own path, I'd be honored to hear it in the comments. And if you'd like to walk through more stories like this together, you're welcome to stay.